Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Diamond Within podcast. I am your host, Courtney Hancock. It's so good to have you all here. Today, I am joined by a very special guest. My dear friend, Jennifer Allen, is here, and we have a very awesome topic that we want to talk to you guys about. First, let me give a really warm intro and applause for Jen for coming on the show today. I actually met Jen through my husband. She works as a title at a title company, and my husband's a real estate broker. And when I first got introduced to Jen, we had a lot of things in common. She is a yoga instructor and also a Thai yoga certified therapist. Right? Am I right? Yeah,
Yep.
and I never heard of Thai yoga, and it was so cool when started doing some Thai I took some Thai yoga from her. It was like one of the coolest things ever. One of the most interesting things that I learned about Jen is when she told me that she took her family to Southeast Asia to explore the culture there for a time and to just get some of the different perspectives that they have there and how things that they have in their culture can be applied to her life and like natural wellness solutions because she's really big into like homeopathic and natural medicine. But then she told me about something that was super cool that I actually had her come and teach it to a group of women in my church. And it's called the ocean of consciousness. And when I first learned about it, that is so cool the way you can think about consciousness in that way. And then she did sound bowl therapy at the end of the activity. It was so fun, so cool. So I'm here. I bring Jen on the show so we can talk a little bit about the ocean of consciousness that she's really passionate about, that she learned at, what was it? Maharishi University. Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Maharishi International University is in Iowa. And I attended online in their consciousness and human potential program. And yeah, it's been life changing to have that concept as a framework to give a new perspective on life, on physiology, and what does consciousness have to do with physiology, and what do we have the ability to do about it, all of it.
oh, that sounds great because in today's society, I mean, I don't know about any of you that are listening, but I am like a victim of my thoughts like all the time and discerning the thoughts and what to do about them and how they affect us, I mean, can be life changing, is what you said, Jen. So, when you're talking about ocean of consciousness, are you describing like just like a state of awareness, like the nature of reality, or is it kind of both?
Yeah, good question. So at the university, they talk about the basis that physiology and consciousness are one, that they're inseparable, and we think about them as, oh, here's the mind over here, and here's my body over here, and that they are separate. And we go to separate doctors for those things oftentimes. The bridge is becoming better, but when we take a look at our body as a whole, it allows us to take a different handle on the results that we get based on the choices that we make, whether that be diet, when we eat,
Yeah,
we get, when we sleep, how much sunlight we get, when we
right.
get, just all the things that come into play with how we end up feeling. It brings into question, what am I experiencing in my life, whether that be physiologically or emotionally or mentally and relationship wise? What is that experience like? And then being able to say, how does that correlate with the state of consciousness that I can be in and that I can access at different times?
Right.
Can I concentrate well? Can I calm my mind well? Or is it spinning in chaos? And how, wherever I am in my state of consciousness, how does that correlate with what happens in my physiology?
Right.
And also what therapies then are effective for, when we recognize where we are in a state of consciousness, how can I then understand how to get and maintain the state that I would like to aim to be in, more, maintain the state that I'd like to be in more steadily,
Yeah,
right?
steadily. And
Not
you
that
actually
a
had a
bow.
Sorry,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I was just
You
going to
first.
say about eliminating the chaos in our life because that will always be there. That's part of the human experience. But it's how do I find equanimity and that peace within the storm?
Exactly. So you actually drew a diagram to help demonstrate this. I know you don't have a diagram with you or paper with you,
Sure.
but could you it's called the ocean of consciousness. So could
Mhm.
you relate it to how it'll like the ocean side of it? Like how does it the consciousness relate to like the metaphor of the ocean?
Sure.
Like we're talking about chaos, and I know I've seen it before, but to our viewers who have no idea what this is,
Sure.
could you kind of basically explain it in oceanic terms?
Yeah. Okay. So if we look at the ocean, there are layers in the ocean, or there are depths, different depths. And when we're at different depths in the ocean, we experience different energies, different movements. There are there are, what is it, the EAC, the currents, that's what I'm going for. Waves at the top. There's all kinds of differentiation at different levels of what experience of energy we would have. And at the very bottom, the model is proposing that there's absolute stillness and a gradient between the chaos at the top and the waves and the stillness at the bottom, which is where there is just quiet and calm and peace and harmony, right?
Right.
At the top, in contrast, being the place where if we are, in that type of energy where the waves are coming at us and it feels like an outside in experience of life, as in everything going on outside of me affects me and I'm a victim of all of it. At the very top was kind of like that optimal victim mode. And at the bottom and at the top, the harder we fight the waves, it feels more like it's exhausting, but we aren't able to make progress. We just get more tired instead of making ground to accomplish what we'd like to accomplish.
Yeah.
At the bottom, there's no fighting to be had in that energy, right? I get it. We can't breathe in the bottom of the ocean. So to take away that aspect, but to say these energies that are taking place, like if I'm in a state of consciousness that allows that type of stillness, I can have clarity. I can feel like what I can have my feet on the ground. And if I were to walk in that stillness and clarity, I could go to where I'd like to go. I can turn and look where I'd like to look. I'm not needing to fight something outside of me.
Yeah. That
Uh,
that relates really well to people because a lot of times we are trying to resist something and or just end up drowning and we can't maintain that. And for people, like what does that chaos look like in real life? Like, do you have an example from your life of some chaos that you were dealing with and like fighting against?
sure. Yeah. I had a time in my life where I felt like I was doing things that were, self medicating, right? So I was running a lot. I was running mountains, and it would not be uncommon to have a really intense workout before the day started, which is like, oh, that's great. Like that's therapeutic. That's good for the mind, stabilize, good for the muscles. So I was doing the things that I felt were helpful for my body, feeling like I'm eating healthy, reading books that I felt would be helpful for me to be a good mom. And I um, didn't understand why, when it came to a moment where patience was needed, I felt like I didn't have a long threshold for, like,
Yeah, your patience was thin, is what you're trying to say.
yeah, yeah. So that didn't make sense. Like I knew in my head what the right answers should be, but I couldn't find them in the moment or like to respond to my kids in a loving way. And I just felt short. And when something would happen, the fuse was short and I would feel fiery inside, even if I didn't feel like I let it out or was explosive. I didn't like the way I felt inside. Come to find out, after a certain amount of time, I ended up signing up for yoga teacher training. My time for running mountains was shortened and my time for doing yoga was increased. And it changed the patience that I felt I had. And come to come to find out later, it may be very likely that I was over exercising and having diminishing returns, right? Not fueling enough, whether it would be even possible to fuel enough. Like based on my constitution, it was overstressing. So then my body was in an extra stressed mode, unconscious to me. And so I just didn't have the same bandwidth and fuse as if I were in a physiologically supported by my food, by my sleep. I was waking up really early to fit it in before the kids went to school, right? Compromising sleep, compromising schedule, and just burning too much and having too much stress on my body. So, to say, some of the things that we do that we think are supporting and helpful, it can be individual for every person as to whether that thing is actually beneficial for them or whether it's diminishing returns or counterproductive, such as cold therapy for some people, not a great idea. For some people, absolutely supportive for their health. So this is part of that. Having a different awareness of what is supportive, having a different awareness of our own makeup. What what are what am I made up of? And that's where Ayurveda comes in. If you've heard of Ayurveda, the like wisdom of life is what that word breaks down to me. And it helps someone understand what is their constitution and how do I, and once I understand my constitution is, I can understand how to balance the imbalances.
Yeah, and
And
you're
that,
talking about, like, the
yeah,
Kapha, the Pitta, and the Vata is what you're
yes,
talking about.
right.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
those who aren't most of you aren't listeners, probably aren't, familiar with these yogic terms, but if you ever wanted to go find out your constitution, there's free quizzes online you can find,
yes,
like your Ayurvedic quiz
right. Just like a dosha
constitution.
assessment or Ayurvedic
Yeah,
assessment would be
your
really helpful.
dosha, that's right.
Yeah.
So
So those things that can contribute to the chaos that are okay, we also have life and work and family and jobs, and those are things we can't control.
mhm,
The more we gain awareness of what is mine to control that I might not be aware of that I can take the reins on, then I can at least create a foundation inside myself of more stillness
right.
that then whatever comes on the external storms, I have the foundation to stand.
Sounds amazing. What you're describing right now is exactly what probably 100% of women, especially mothers or the working moms, are dealing with because there's not one person out there who doesn't have suffering of some kind in their
Yeah,
life, right? Doesn't have a
right.
trial or a health issue that all creeps up on us of some kind, whether it's death or job loss. It just everyone has something in their life. And so you're describing how your situation was and how you needed to listen to your body to realize I need more. I don't have the patience that I want. I'm
Hmm.
overdoing it. I'm so stressed and I've got to do something about this. And then you discovered yoga and then it helped you tune inside and it felt develop that higher sense of awareness. And then when you learned about this ocean of consciousness, you're describing when it was at the top, that chaos, that waves. And so there's this journey, this descent that we have to talk about of like, how do we get to that stillness, right?
Yeah.
And how do we also like look at our suffering with the right perspective at the same time? Because you could look at it as with just a viewpoint of God's punishing me, this is all my fault, this kind of stuff, or you could frame it and look at it in a positive way in that journey to stillness, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Well, when you just finally discovered this ocean of consciousness and yoga was starting to help you, what were the steps that you took in that descent to find that stillness? And then when did you finally feel like you got to that point of stillness? Like start from like you're at the top and then like what did you do next?
It's like day to day, moment to moment. And it's not ever meant to be, I mean, hopefully, like we will always have something to be expansive by being a bit of a storm, right? That can help us have that stretch and help us have that development. I think that a lot of the suffering that we have is because we think that there shouldn't be a storm. And so we want to get rid of it instead of accepting this is the human experience and that the human experience is having a body and learning what is within my control in my body and what is not in my control in my body and what is outside of me, what is within my control and what is not within my control. The descent, the finding the different depths, accessing the different depths of consciousness comes from a couple of things. Number one is that they talk about in my school is healing the nervous system. One of them is healing the nervous system. And that I think is definitely underrated, but that's what I see was first happening for me, where when I calmed my nervous system and didn't have as much stress, internal stress from maybe not having enough nutrition to support the level of activity I was doing. When I calmed that stress, I had more bandwidth. I was able to digest my food better because if we're in fight or flight, our stomach goes into the background a little bit. So I wasn't digesting as well. And it just becomes this compounding problem of cascading overflow into we function in all of our life. So healing the nervous system is huge. And that can be, like I mentioned, sleep, diet, timing, circadian rhythm that we align with or don't align with can make a difference. We can look at all the lifestyle factors, right? Balancing what type of exercise, even not just are we exercising or not, but is it a type of exercise that aligns with my constitution? So healing the nervous system in all those ways. And then we have, they call it clarifying consciousness. And that would be things like you're mentioning of perspective. What's the perspective I have on this? Can I see a bigger vantage point than just the tunnel vision, which comes with a nervous system that is highly stressed? We get that tunnel vision, but and it's like survival mode. I'm in this for myself. It's all up to me. Anytime that we're feeling that way, then we can know that, oh, I'm in a tunnel vision, right? But if we can have clarity to our consciousness, or which can come from different communication skills, like I love DBT skills, like dialectical behavioral therapy skills, where we can find ways to hold unity within diversity so that it's not an either or living, but we can expand our perspective, right?
Yeah.
So, skill sets, communication skills, and having a different framework of what is possible, right? So,
Right.
bringing faith into the picture, bringing the potential for change, bringing the perspective that this is for my good, and gaining access to guidance from my internal self rather than just my head brain. I can also have my heart on board. I can have my gut on board, all three brains, and then underlying like my higher self, my spirit to guide.
It seems like there's other topics that we could easily dive into when you're talking about the three brains, because I've definitely heard that many times before. But I
Mhm.
mean, if you were talking to somebody who had heard this for the first time and they realize, oh my gosh, I'm in constant stress all the time, and you're
Mhm.
telling me I gotta heal my nervous system, like, well, what the heck do I do to heal my nervous system? I mean, we don't have to take a deep dive, but what would be like some first steps that someone could take to healing their nervous system?
I think that we oftentimes try to go to something that's too big too fast. Kind of like if I were to want to start a practice of something, I need to start with the very, very basics and the most subtle practice before I try to ride a bucking bronco, right? With healing the nervous system, I have a background in breath work, and that's going to bring this answer is that you start with the most subtle, and the most subtle, in my perspective, is the breath. And there's a story, an ancient story that can help depict this. So there's a man who ends up being trapped in a tower by an evil ruler, right? So this holy man is trapped and he reaches out, gets a message out to his wife and says, hey, I'm trapped in this tower. I need you to bring some supplies. And he writes out the supplies that he needs her to bring. He says, bring a horned beetle, some honey, bring a silk, like a silk thread, and then a regular thread, and then a piece of twine and a piece of cord and a piece of rope, right? And he says, bring all of these, I'll meet you at nighttime. So she brings all the things at the appointed time. He gives her the instruction, okay, now put the honey on the horned beetle's nose and point it up towards and tie the silk thread around the beetle and point it up towards my window. And the beetle, smelling the honey, was lured to go straight forward, and the weight of the silk was so little that it could carry that silk thread all the way to the top. so that it was dangling down at the bottom. And he said, now fix the piece of regular thread to the silk thread. And he carefully used the silk thread to access the actual thread, right? The
Okay.
cotton thread, right?
Yeah.
That was a little stronger. And then he said, attach the thread to the next, each one being sequentially more strong. He's able to pull up a little bit more at a time. And each one was able to sustain the weight of the next. And then he had the rope, and then he could fix the rope to the bed and climb out to freedom. So, like that, we start with the most subtle. And that's why breath work is such a big thing and why people can find so much help from it, is because what is the simplest thing I can try to take accountability for and responsibility for is how do I take my next breath? And am I aware of where it's coming from? Where am I drawing my breath from? Is it in my upper lungs where it's kind of like a rabbit response and I'll stay in a fight or flight rabbit response if I'm only breathing in my upper lungs? Or can I be aware and say, check in, am I safe right now? And if I'm safe right now, am I breathing in my upper lungs even though I know I'm safe? And if I'm safe, I'm going to shift my physiology by drawing air down into my lower lungs. And as I practice this most subtle practice and calm my nervous system by shifting where I'm breathing to, because it's going to stimulate different nerves that trigger my whole body to say, I'm okay. If I can breathe this way, I'm okay. I can relax. I can turn on my digestion. I can send more oxygen to my brain. I can breathe deeper so that I then, instead of diminishing returns, we're having expanding right action that can then make space for more right action, which then makes more bandwidth to take more but right action. So that instead of in a nervous system shot place, trying to say, I'm going to stop all my impulses for eating emotional eating, right? That's like getting right on the Bronco instead of practicing what needs to practice before getting on. But if we can have the subtle things first and sequentially make a decision based on what we're able and ready to do rather than jumping to something so big as changing our entire diet, it won't be sustainable unless we start to do other things first that build up to a big change.
And that's
So
why I think a lot of people fail at New Year's resolutions because they're getting on that Bronco too fast. And
right.
like they want it so fast and they want to see we want things so quickly. We don't aren't willing to go through the process and the struggle to actually get that long-term sustainability in
Yeah.
our
Or
lives.
just not
Or just
aware
not
of
aware, yeah.
what is it that I can take the reins on first that will help me then be a support for the next step.
And
Build the
exactly. And one thing I think something that people don't realize is how grounding the breath really, really is. As a medical professional, as a nurse, I know that the stress response comes from the sympathetic nervous system,
Mhm.
which is the fight, flight, or freeze, right? Just to keep you alive. But then by default, it sends blood flow away from the internal organs and not to the extremities to keep us alive. Like
Yeah.
what you were saying, it's when that blood flow is diminished to our internal organs, then our digestion is affected, and then there's just not as an optimalization in that digestion is so crucial to be able for us to be able to get optimal nutrient absorption, and that's I think where you get gut problems and imbalances in the gut microflora um, that just can cascade into a ton of other health problems. Mine, for instance, like my food sensitivities and like my thyroid cancer, thyroidectomy. I mean, it just was like, it was really hard to go through that to lose something so vital as the thyroid that regulates metabolism, heart rate, and breath, and so much more I've discovered.
Hormones. Yeah.
Hormones, yes. It's
Yeah.
just literally some days I'm Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with the ups and downs of fluctuating synthetic thyroid hormone and energy levels and other how it affects like female hormones. It's just
Yeah.
it's a downright difficult roller coaster to live every day. So, like, if you were telling someone and who lives with chronic illness or who's going like some kind of like financial collapse or grief, I mean, what does this actually look in practice? He's like, oh, it's all good talk, but like when I'm actually in real life, like how do I actually do it? How do I apply this? You know, you mentioned the breath, but I mean, like, if someone's in constant fight or flight all the time, I mean, like, what's the best thing that someone can do to just to recognize that and then to just implement this?
Sure. So, one of the aspects that can be really helpful if we're in circumstances that we feel like we haven't chosen is to say, okay, what is it that is in my life that maybe I didn't choose it, but here it is, right? And to choose it.
Well, when you're
So,
saying choose it, you're meaning mostly just to
accept it.
accept it. That
So,
doesn't
instead,
mean you accept like the worst case scenario, though, right? You're just accepting the situation as it is without judgment. Is that what you're saying?
sure. Yeah. And practicing allowing it to be. Because just allowing it to be what it is, if we are in a state of constantly pushing something energetically away from us, like, I do not want this in my life. This can't be here anymore. I have to get rid of it. That may or may not be within our control. But if we are in the stress and we're increasing the energy of fighting it as something inside me, but if I'm going to be in an energy and a mindset of I'm at war with this thing inside me, that's different than here's something inside me that needs different care. It needs nurturing. And that's a different energy and a different stress than choosing to nurture something,
Yeah.
even if it's just the thoughts and that concept. So one of the subtle things there I would say is we use the breath and we even spend time with that concept. What is mine to control right now? I can control my breath. I can't control whether this condition is here or not, but I can control my breath and I can control my relation. I can practice in my relationship with this thing. I can practice having an openness to it instead of a choking energy on it. When we try to choke an emotion, when we try to choke out a memory, that leads to literal constriction of vessels in our body so that nutrients can't be delivered, oxygen can't be delivered as well. And then we have breakdown of tissues or higher susceptibility of injury to those tissues, back pain, just these chronic conditions where it might be that I'm just continually frustrated and angry that something happened in my life instead of this happened in my life. And so, what am I going to do different? What do I get to learn from that? That if I learned that is something I did not like, I can say, that's not love. And I can thank that source for teaching me what's not love. And then because I know what's not love, I'm going to practice what is, right? So, finding ways to, we're not necessarily wishing for it to increase, but can we be willing that if it were to, we can accept that as well.
I
And
think
it
that's a
doesn't mean we
difficult
don't do
thing.
something about it, but we change the energy of having it instead of cutting off my hand because it's hurting. I say, hand, like you are part of me and I'm grateful you're part of me. Let's increase our awareness of what we get to do and increase calm the nervous system so I have a better bandwidth to take the action when I'm aware of what action to take to support all the parts of me.
So when you're talking about accepting it, is there a way that you could also, in your perspective, find gratitude and joy in it as you're accepting it as not just something to be, but can you actually view it with even higher perspective in your
Yeah. I mean, that's been my experience, right? With some childhood trauma stuff like we all have, right? But those have become, like I mentioned, we wouldn't wish this on someone else. But from the processes I've been through, from the instruction, I very much can see those people who I had interactions with that were not healthy. I can have so much gratitude to them for what I couldn't have learned without that. I mean, in I haven't had another way that taught me in the way that experience taught me what is what is not love, and also what does it mean to have forgiveness on the other side and to practice forgiveness and to practice compassion and even um, to be able to say, here's where I saw, dishonesty expressed towards me that I didn't appreciate, or unhealthy touch, whatever that may be. Here's how that was expressed towards me that I didn't appreciate. And then I can say, where might I be holding a form of that that is not healthy, whether it's inside of me or an expression outside of me? Where am I not honest? Where am I not treating my body in a way that is kind and compassionate? So that helps me find something in common with the adversity or that person instead of, again, that energy of separating or choking. I'm saying we are all part of this human experience. And just like the ocean of consciousness, we are individual drops, but we make up one ocean, and we could hate that we're in that ocean, but what good does it do but cause misery because this is where we are. And the more
Yeah.
we can find common, the less stress. That sounds kind of counterintuitive when you're
Right.
looking at setting healthy boundaries. But it's not to say I want to be like this person, but it can say I might have that because I'm in the human condition as well. I might have that in me too. And if I say I will never be like that person, I will never be dishonest, I'm shutting off my brain to look for ways that I might be dishonest. And then I'm gonna
Interesting.
be living oblivious to what would be really helpful for me to be aware of instead and take accountability and make the changes in myself instead.
It's interesting you say that because I think a lot of us will say, "Oh, I'm never going to be like this person," or "I'm never going to parent the way my parents did." But you're saying right now that that cuts that limits your perspective even more. It makes you less grateful for those circumstances that led you to where you are.
Sure.
It does limit your perspective and your ability to connect. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. Or to have an open experience of life instead of that choking energy that
Yeah.
we carry around and overprotect, be over vigilant instead of being able to say, oh, I've had this experience. And when we can find that healing and open and connection when it is safe, right? There are times to protect. There is a place for boundaries, but to find where it is safe, to find that expansive energy, then I can relax into life. I can turn off the hypervigilance and know that something hard happened and something hard will happen again. And so, what am I going to do to prepare myself? What am I going to do to nurture myself and those around me and respond accordingly rather than be in a hating, hypervigilant, I always have to protect mode?
And having that outward perspective is something that I also address and something I talk about in my book too, is that during the suffering, it can be really difficult to have that outward perspective and get out of that narrow mindedness that you were talking about from having that nervous system that's constantly in fight or flight. So, to
Yeah.
someone who may be struggling with that outward perspective and lack of self awareness, I mean, what's a good thing that they could do to become more self aware instead of just being so narrow mindedness?
So this is such an interesting question, and I have a really simple answer that is a gateway to a more substantial practice. But like going back to that most subtle, right? We start with the most subtle. I'll answer your question more specifically, but with the ocean of consciousness, when we recognize a certain state we're in, whether that's we're able to tap into intellect or we're able to tap into reasoning or problem solving or curiosity and creativity and sense of self responsibility and accountability, sense of oneness with other people, and these are different states that we can tap into. If we're in fight or flight, it feels good to do art therapy because it brings us to a deeper state of consciousness. If we are in that fight or flight, it feels good to do Sudoku because it brings us into reasoning and intellect, which is a little deeper state of consciousness. It feels good to do journaling because it's self reflection. It feels good to do meditation because there's stillness in that depth of consciousness, right?
Yeah.
But if we try to do meditation too fast, there might be frustration because we we need to start with the breath, the most subtle. So one of the most subtle things for expanding our perspective, this is interesting. I just heard this yesterday. But think about how good it feels to be in a place where you can see really far.
Oh,
Like
interesting.
oftentimes we're like, "Oh my gosh, look at that vista." I just got chills. Like just imagine yourself in those places where I've been able to feel that sensation. But there's something calming to the nervous system, and maybe it's this sense of freedom and expansiveness. But it's one of those, if we're in tunnel vision and we give ourselves a chance to see something far away, it helps deepen that state of consciousness and change the physiology a little bit, just like breathing deeper, lower lungs. That's another little, quick fix. Just look farther. Look
It's
as far
interesting
as
you say that because I have the Wasatch Mountains out my bedroom and kitchen window that I can see every day, and that's something, it's not super far away, but it is a little far away, and I can see that view every day, and I
yeah.
never thought of it that way, though.
Right. Something about it is calming to the nervous system. And I think it, has something to do with expanding that tunnel vision that we feel trapped in. It's like, oh, I don't have to be here. I can, okay. I'm not in a cage, right? It just gives a little bit of a different experience for the
Yeah,
whole
that's
system.
just
to ex-
interesting how, like, something visual like that just immediately affects the nervous system and the mind and then the entire body. I mean, and I'm
Yeah.
a full advocate on, anything physical also affects the mind as well, that the mind and body are one. It's not
Yeah.
mental and physical, it's all one. So,
Right. And from there, then being able, from a place of less fight or flight and less victim mode, maybe coming to some compassion for self and saying, what does this part of myself need? What did I actually need when it occurred, right? And start to develop this compassion from ourselves. And from there saying, how do I live differently because that happened in ways that are helpful, because there might be ways that are not helpful that we're living differently, right? But to say, are there ways that maybe I treat people differently because I know how it feels to be treated unkindly or to be called these names or to be labeled in that way? How have I chosen to? And is there opportunity for me to do a little differently, right?
yeah, I mean, I think one thing I want to touch on here is when you said self compassion. I feel like so many people, and mothers especially, are just in constant, like, selfless mode of trying to do things for other people that we forget ourselves. I mean, dads are this way too. Dads are providers too, and how we just let that self care, the self compassion, self love kind of slip. I feel like it's really important to not let that slip because if you are not taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be able to take care of anyone else in your life or go to your job or whatever it is you're doing in your life. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's ironic that the word selfless means like the opposite of selfish, but at the same time, if we're not coming from a foundation where our nervous system is healed and we actually have something to give, then we are putting ourselves below the worth of others. They're worth more than me, which is a sense of victim mentality. And so there will be stress in that dynamic that will be less sustainable than if I am taking care of myself, fueling myself spiritually and emotionally, ensuring that before I give, I'm tapping in. And that sometimes those reserves are just spiritual, right? But it's not from I'm doing this because I have to because I'm a mom. I love my child so much and this is how I love them. And just the slight energetic shifts. And I can love them actually by ensuring that my needs are met. The whole oxygen mask, you got to have it on yourself before you can put it on someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah, It's not uncommon for people that I work with to feel like it's hard for them to allow themselves to invest into their own wellness. But when you look at the returns, such as when I was responding to my kids in an unhealthy place, it absolutely changed. You can ask my kids like pre-yoga mom and post-yoga mom, just a different experience, right?
Very
And
different.
so grateful, like these things that I was not aware of why I was making that change until after, how impactful it was to not just inside of me, but how much it changed. I didn't have to force the relationship. I didn't have to force the patience anymore. By taking care of me, it naturally that overflowed into solving things that I was giving more attention to than necessary.
Interesting you talk about you weren't forcing because I saw a quote by it was an Instagram video of Bruce Lee in
Mhm.
interviews. And one of the things he said, which stuck out to me, was force is easy, but awareness is rare. And I was like, yeah, like having that
Yeah.
sense of awareness. I mean, it takes time to recognize those triggers that might bring up that emotion or that response or that thought that you're or that response that you might regret, to take that moment of pause and reflect before you do anything or before you say something to this person. It's human nature to not think or before we do anything, not before we speak.
Mm.
And having that sense of awareness, it's taken time for me to develop as well with how my thoughts affect how I feel
Right.
and how it causes physiological responses in the body. Like I've had panic attacks a
Mhm.
handful of times in my life, and I can attribute it to um, like thoughts that led up to that panic attack. And ultimately, like the last one I had to escape the situation so that I didn't like shout at somebody. And I could feel it boiling up. I could feel it just like I was gonna blow, and I grabbed my hands in my hair, like literally like this, like I have to leave. I need to go lay down. I need to go
Yeah.
breathe. And so I laid down on my bed and I just was breathing it out. And then finally let it cry out and finally was
Good.
able to calm down. So
I love
it's
that.
just crazy how much those thoughts lead to those biological responses in our body where something's
Mm.
out of balance. And then my therapist actually said that panic attacks are the body's way of resolving that imbalance, which I believe there's truth in that too, because if there's an imbalance, the body's got to release it somehow.
Right.
Oh, but we just have to do it safely, right?
Right. And I love how you brought up the power versus force at the in the model of the ocean of consciousness. Forcing things is our inclination when we're at the top. But like we talked about, you can swim and swim and try to fight the waves, but it's going to be absolutely futile. And same goes with trying to force another human being. When we don't have the bandwidth of very much space between stimulus and response, we're not thinking reasonably, we're not thinking with compassion. And so being up there, we're going to relate to people in a very different way as opposed to when we're in a place of having more of those states of consciousness on board allows us to pause and think, consider how is the other person feeling, or ask the question to our child, what, what is your, tell me more about your experience right now. So he can meet them where they're at and then together come up with a solution instead of, you need to do right now what I'm saying because I said so.
Yeah.
Right? That's the force mode, and it tends to dissolve relationships instead of, let me meet you where you are, and together we're going to move forward together.
Yeah. I think like to maybe come to a closing position here. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are suffering that just view their suffering as it's never going to end and there's no
Mm.
hope, but and they're trying to force something, they're trying to find solutions. So how can they apply the ocean of consciousness just on a daily basis? I mean, for me, I have to take moments where I'm just like sitting by anywhere and just maybe realigning, or I have to sit still for just a minute, or I have to lay down for a minute. For someone in my position who's suffering with a chronic illness, I mean, what's like some of the biggest takeaways that you would want someone to take away? with the ocean of consciousness.
Yeah. That concept that I mentioned, right action breeds right action. And what works is what we're capable, what we have the bandwidth to do right now. So instead of having the frustration of, I've tried this so many times and I'll never be able to do that thing or have that discipline, having the self compassion to say, it's not that I will never be able to, there's something to bridge that gap first.
So
And so starting with the breath and see what does that build, what builds on that. Maybe it's a 5 minute, 2 minute meditation. And then from that, making some decisions, proactive decisions. How do I want, making an intention for the day? How do I want to interact with this person? Or taking time for gratitude, which is kind of like broadening that tunnel vision. Here's all the things I have in my life instead of here's all the things I have good in my life. Just those little things at the beginning of the day that set the stage for the rest of the day are huge. Aligning the circadian rhythm, aligning just looking at the sun in the morning. Just start with the little things that you're willing to do, and then just one thing at a time, adding a little more, a little more. And sometimes there are itches we can't scratch ourselves, and that's where you bring in help and support. That's
bringing in
where
help and support. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Feel like we have to be, or we feel like we have to go it alone so many times because we think no one
right.
else understands. But we are connected to everyone on the planet in some regard because we
Mhm.
all have human hearts and energies and we are all part of the same human family. So I've come to learn that my suffering is a process of refinement. If I look back on the things that I've been through, I definitely can see the growth and how it was meant to shape me and refine me into something that shines bright like a diamond or a gem that is unbreakable. And
Yeah.
if you can see your trials that way, see it as a gift and use these tools, these tactics that we've talked about today to ground you, to bring you to a safer place where you can recognize those triggers to promote healing and increase that mental awareness, that softness, and then eventually that stillness where these different states of consciousness reside, like you talked about. That's where I feel like that's where transformation really occurs. Like you become a new person. And
Mhm.
that continues to change over and over and over because there's new trials that continue to come that are going to challenge your beliefs even more and more, that are going to have to tell you, okay, now I got to go back to these tactics that I've learned. I got to start with the breath because here's a new challenge. And my body freaks out when it's a new challenge because I don't know how to deal with it. Right. And
Mm.
it's, because it takes time to learn to adapt to anything, right? A new skill, new situation. And so these tactics are timeless. They really are. If you learn to slow down with the simple things, the breath, start by looking out your window, Jen said. Look, or an image of a vast expanse or like an ocean view or something where you've seen something very far away. Do something that can ground you and calm your nervous system. And then you can slowly work your way into that descent where you can find stillness, where like you literally do become that new person or that gemstone or diamond or whatever it is relates well to you. Any final thoughts, Jen?
Yeah, I mean, there can be this inclination of I just always want to be in peace, right? And but yet then we take away, like you're saying, the pressure, the practice. Last analogy in Southeast Asia and in these different places where you see the monks in the yellow robes and it's like such a vibrant yellow. They teach using that analogy of how do those come to be dyed. And it's that there's you put the fabric in the dye and then you lay it in the sun. And then it's not done. If you were to just do it the one time, you wash the fabric and it would just, the color would go away. It wouldn't be really integrated. So it's this process of dipping, drying, and just many, many times. And that is why is it important to be in the chaos and then the stillness? Life is this. It's coming to the surface, learning, having the experience and being able to say, whoa, whoa, that this is a whoa, this is a lot. What do I opportunity now in this? How do I learn to love in this new experience? How do I learn to calm and accept? How do I learn to accept and be okay with this from where I am? So yeah, here's to the practice.
Here's to the roller coaster. That's the constant flow that all of us are in. But
Yeah.
if we can learn that, these are things that will consistently help us with new challenges. And each time we go through them, we get refined a little bit more each time. And it is
Mhm.
this transformational process that just is a lifetime of learning. But it's the perspective of I get to do this. I get to learn. I get to experience all this and to look at it with the right perspective that this is a gift that's given to me and it's a new chance to do better every day and to not look at it as a curse every day.
Not easy.
Nope,
Not easy.
not easy, but it is 100% possible. And if any of this resonated with you and your listeners, I would challenge you to think of how you view your suffering and how you can implement the things that we've talked about today in the ocean of with the ocean of consciousness and how it affects everything in our life and how we can find that gratitude, that peace, that stillness in the storms, in the oceans, or whatever you want to call it, in the fire, in the pressure, and it is possible. Jen, thank you so much for being here today. You've been amazing. To everyone
Sure.
listening, thanks for coming and being here. I'll talk to you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.